Welcome to another episode of our podcast, Conversations with the Industry. I'm Elise Levy, and I am joined today by my co-hosts, Holly Henry and Larry Elevitz of the Investing Advice Roundtable. We're so excited to be back for season 2, and we have a really great group of speakers that are lined up to talk with us this upcoming season. Today, we are kicking off the new season with Ashley Cerda, the CEO and therapist at Curated Health. Man, I'm struggling with that word. Ashley, thank you so much for being here today to talk with us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm especially excited to have Ashley here. I feel like I've known Ashley personally about all my entire life. We grew up together in a very, very small town in Arkansas. And for me, it's been amazing to just sit back and watch Ashley grow into the person that she is and to see all that she has accomplished. So it really is just my honor and privilege to get the opportunity to have you here on this podcast. So before we get started with Ashley answering all of our questions, Larry, would you mind giving us a brief introduction?
Sure. Ashley Cerda is currently located in Northwest Arkansas. She has a PhD in psychology with an emphasis on teaching and researching psychology and master's in clinical psychology. She has worked in substance abuse and mental health treatment for over a decade. She's passionately trained and developed specialties in addictions, eating disorders, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, and now hypnotherapy.
Ashley, aside from what Larry just said, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself for our audience?
So I mean, as Holly said, I'm from a tiny town in Arkansas, and I love education. I love the opportunity to learn. I actually just started another master's program today because I'm glutton for punishment. And I moved up to Northwest Arkansas and started my practice up here. I have a couple of kids and a bonus kid now, and I'm doing all of the living. But I love people. I love how our brains work. We are fascinating creatures. And the more that I have learned about how we work, why we do what we do, just the more enthralled that I become.
That's so amazing. And our job also, I feel like we are all called to it because we're fascinated by people and want to work with people and learn more about them. So as financial advisors, we obviously want to talk to you about money and people's emotional reaction to money. So what have you really seen that are the most common emotional reactions that people have with money in their personal finances?
So what is interesting and amazing about finances is it's one of the few places that you will see the entire gamut of emotions. There is everything from awe to extreme frustration and shame, and depending on how you were brought up with finances, it changes completely. I mean, we think about generational wealth with finances, right? But we don't think about generational trauma, and it's a thing. The way that our families through the generations have engaged with finances completely change how we do it. I mean, and so take Holly and I, we grew up in the exact same town, same situations, and the way that her family engaged with money and the way my family engaged with money may have been so different that our personal takeaway from it is drastically changed. And so when you see people talking about their finances in therapy, normally it's not great. It's by the time they come to me talking about it, things have gone askew. But I also see people who have shame and guilt from having more money than others. And it's just, you really do see the entire span of human emotion when it comes to finances.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just, your home and your parents, they do really have a big effect on how you see money and how you relate to it. Because I was going to ask how your early relationship with money kind of shapes your adult financial behavior, but instead I want to ask, how can people kind of move past their early relationship with money and develop a new relationship as an adult?
Right. The first step is recognizing what your early relationship with money was. If we don't know where we came from, you don't know how to change. I tell my clients all the time, we can't live in the I'm not gonna's. So we have a tendency to say, I'm not going to be like my parents. I'm not going to handle money like my parents did. I'm not going to handle money like my brother does. I'm not going to, right? Like, and that's not reality. That's not how our brains work. You have to understand where you came from and then make a purposeful choice of this is what I want to do moving forward. So if you grew up in a poverty mindset, you have to recognize what that is, what that does to you, and then make very purposeful decisions to move forward while processing through the emotions that come along with it.
So one of the questions that I have for you is, how do our beliefs about money impact relationships as adults? And I really don't want this constrained. I know I automatically think of like husband and wife, but I want this to even be as open as friendships, parents, family. And is there any, I know obviously you can't break HIPAA, but is there any broad examples that you can give us?
So I always use me and my family because it's free, right? Like I won't break HIPAA using myself, right? So when, as an adult, when I started recognizing the way that my family handles their finances, and they're not in bad financial situations, right? But they just do kind of moment to moment thinking, and it comes from the background of poverty, growing up with nothing, and then building their wealth a little bit over time. And so catching that for myself while watching them make decisions has been interesting. So knowing that if I want to travel, I have to make certain accommodations with my finances, right? Whereas I'm willing to not buy extra things or not go to lunch however many times that takes for me to build that up. The way that my mother interacts with money is completely different, right? And she'll be like, oh, well, we just can't travel. I'm like, wrong, right? And so it's just recognizing those little idiosyncrasies from people, right? And same with friendships, right? So if I have a friend that is in a vastly different socioeconomic background than I am, the way that we interact is automatically changed. Because I don't want to invite you to do things that you're not going to be capable of doing, and I don't want to put a strain on your finances by doing that. And so what you end up seeing is people tend to stick in certain circles because of that, because they don't know how to accommodate different levels of income.
Yeah, and I think that even makes sense to people's spending habits. Like, I'm a tightwad. Like, it doesn't matter if I have the money or not. I'm probably not going to go and just blow several hundred on an event during the weekend. I'm just not. So I tend to have friends that are very conservative in their spending too, because we're never going to go out. So, okay. So another question for you: what financial information or topics should be discussed when you're just newly dating, or even if you're engaged? Like, what advice do you have for those that are in this boat right now?
Right. All of them. So you need to talk about literally everything that you can think of. So again, I can use my situation because it's free. I recently got married, and the conversations that Aaron and I had about our finances were very in depth. And it was the good, the bad, and the ugly. If you hold anything back, then you are going to have arguments later. The number one cause of divorce is not infidelity, it's finances. And people sometimes look at me like I'm crazy when I say that, but I'm just like, if you can't get on the same page with your finances, then it will always cause problems. Even if it's, if you are an extremely conservative person, Holly, and you're dating someone or married to someone who is extremely, what's the word I want to use? Trying to be nice here. So if they just spend every second spending money because they're like, we can always make more. And you're like, no, it's going to itch your crazy and it's not going to work well, right? And so we started with the big ones: debt. Do you have debt? How much? Where is it? What does it look like? And I asked the questions of, have you ever defaulted on a debt or a loan? Or, I need to know what's your credit score? What does it look like and why? And there are real reasons why we need to know this, right? Because if you're planning a future with someone, you need to know. But I also ask questions like, what type of restaurants do you like to go to? What are the price ranges of those restaurants, right? I am not extremely bougie, but I'm not going to eat fast food. Right? So like I'm not going to do that. And that's something that Aaron needed to know about me because that wasn't something he was used to, right? I mean, I don't go drop $300 on a meal, but I'm not going to go to a place that's going to cost $20 for the both of us either.
Right.
And
No, I think that's a really good, and I think so I've just recently started dating someone, and like one of our first conversations, and here I am a financial advisor, is he said he felt like the stock market was gambling. So I can say like up front, like the way we handle our finances very different. So people that are dating someone or married or that have different views on money, what advice do you give them to get over that?
so again, it's how we have the conversations. Aaron and I are opposite end of the spectrums on most things, which I find hilarious, but I think it gives us balance. It's the way that we have conversations about it. So he is all about wanting to build generational wealth. And I'm like, that ship has sailed. We don't have that. Like, that's not even a possibility for us. We just want to, like, I don't know, we can buy extra land and build them a house on it. It's fine. And just being open and honest about that, about why we believe the way that we believe. And again, going back to your background of this is how I grew up and this is what it looks like for me, and allowing them to do the same. And then being able to realize what your deal breakers are. Right? It is okay to have differences of opinion. It's not okay to have something where you're like, that will always bother me, but that is something that they're going to die on that hill.
Right.
That's when we need to start having that conversation of, is this worth it? Because knowing that finances is always going to be a topic of conversation. Whether you're doing great, whether you're struggling, right? It's always going to be a topic of conversation. And so if you have vastly different opinions and are unwilling to compromise on it, you need to get out.
Right.
That's a problem.
I know that's good. That's good advice. And one of the things that's a very hot topic for those of us that are financial advisors is behavioral finance. And specifically, and you touched on this, infidelity, but we go as far as saying financial infidelity is one of the biggest things that we see people battle within their marriages. And for those of you that are listening that may not be familiar with what even financial infidelity is, it can be something, it's exactly what it sounds like. People hiding accounts, maybe not even telling their significant other how much they make exactly, because they're taking money and not, or they're spending it on ways that they're not supposed to be spending it. So actually, I'm gonna let you take it from here. What can couples do to prevent that, and what have you specifically seen in that area?
Oh gosh, I have seen, again, the entire spectrum on that, where it's a little bit of mad money that I just kind of tuck away just in case, right? To having offshore accounts that their spouse doesn't know about. And then it's just like, okay, so that's a big one, right? But even the mad money, why is it that you think that you need that? To me, it's a symptom of a bigger problem in the relationship. It is a lack of trust and a lack of vulnerability with your partner. And I always say, if you can't be vulnerable with your partner, you don't need to be in that relationship. We, in theory, have one life, right? And so if you're going to spend your one life with this person, but yet you don't trust them with something as important as our finances, and you're going to be lying and having to figure out how to cover up your tracks and make things right. The amount of jokes that I see on TikTok about, I got to get to the front door to get my package before my partner knows that I ordered something, blows my mind. Because it's extremely toxic to think that you're allowed in, and I say allowed, and I'll come back to that, but you're allowed in a relationship to withhold even small things. So why I say allowed, there shouldn't be one person that is controlling the relationship and the other person has to fall in a certain way. You need to be in step with each other, right? And so if it is feeling as though I'm not allowed to say that, hey, I bought this thing off of Amazon, right? There's a problem. If it's, we don't have the money and I'm buying it anyway, there's a psychological problem there, because we know that we're doing things that's a version of self-harm. And a lot of people don't think of it that way. They don't think of financial stress and distress when you know that you're already in distress and you're still continuing poor spending habits. That's self-harm.
Well, and kind of, I'm going to go back to what you mentioned, these TikTok videos. I feel like our culture has made this a trend.
Yes.
And I don't know if you see it as much as what we do, but when we speak to clients, it's almost like this funny game on how much they can sometimes get by with their significant others, even with something just as small as the Amazon packages.
Right. So I mean, especially in the day and age of Ring cameras and everything else, it's like telling them on the order form to put it somewhere else than on the front porch, so that it's just that people get elaborate with it. And why do we need to have that degree of, one, it's toxic. It's just absolutely toxic behavior. A lot of the trends that have become societal, not expectations, but they've become okay, right? And in society, it's like, we'll let it pass. It's fine. It's just toxic behavior. And again, there's a psychological problem there. There's a problem within the marriage. There's a problem within the individual. There's trauma surrounding money and or things that needs to be addressed. The ability to look at a situation and say, why did you purchase that? That should be there for your partner, right? And now if you're micromanaging everything that you do, that's one thing. But being able to say, well, so Aaron got a package last night. And I'm like, what's that? And he's like, it's new emblem covers. I'm like, yes, because that was something we needed in our world. And that was the end of the conversation, right? Like, it wasn't this big, long thing. I'm sure he spent 20, 30 bucks on it, whatever. But if he felt the need to hide that from me because I was going to say, yes, because that's something we need in our world, then we have a problem within our relationship, within the trust, within our own boundaries, right?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We've talked a lot recently about the marriages, significant other, when you're dating, you're engaged, and those topics to discuss financially. But it doesn't have to be even for that. It can be going back to, family or friends. How can we improve our financial communication skills when we're having these conversations?
So you already hit on it. Being able to say, how does your family handle finances, right? Because so I come into it with student loan debt, right? I have all of the degrees, and with that comes student loan debt, and I own that. I will start the conversation financially of like, I have no credit card debt, I have no other debt, but I do have student loans out the wazoo, right? And so that's something that luckily they die with me, but it's one of those things that I needed to have that conversation, but I also needed to say, but just so you know, my family has struggled with debt. My mom has struggled with credit card debt in the past. She's got on top of it now. She's working, right? Like, but just so you know, that's where we are. And then that opened up the door for Aaron to be like, well, my mom's great with money. My dad, on the other hand, makes choices that just don't make sense to me. And for us to know that information about how our family handles money, because when we're not being purposeful, right? When we live in the I'm not gonna's, we fall back into that default. And what your default is what your parents taught you, whether it was purposeful teachings or even a lack of teaching. So if you come into a relationship and you're like, well, what was your family's conversations about money? And they're looking at you like, I don't know. You need to know that information. You need to know that they never talked about money. You need to know that they're coming in blind with it, or that it's all self-taught, right? And so having those conversations about how your family have interacted with money, how they taught you, if they taught you, that's hugely important. And then how you have changed that, if at all, right? So one of the trends that I'm seeing right now, what are the non-serious generational curses that you're breaking, right? And a lot of them are, well, we have we have money, you can get a toy at the store. We have money, you can do this, right? And that's been one of those things. And what I see from that is the trauma that people had surrounding money from their childhood that they haven't dealt with. Right. And so being able to talk about those things, vital.
Yeah, it's just explaining why you are the way you are.
Right.
Really. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So how does money impact like self-esteem, self-worth, those kind of topics?
It depends entirely on how you interacted with money throughout your childhood, but it's one of those things that I have seen people who come from exceptional wealth have severe low self-esteem because they feel like the only reason why people are around them is because their family has money.
Yeah.
I have seen people come from absolute poverty that have severe low self-esteem because, right? And then you see, I mean, the opposite ends of the spectrum where people think that they're 10 foot tall and bulletproof because their family has money and right. And it impacts you the way that, I mean, our schema is built of all of the things in our life, everything that has happened from us from birth until now. Finances is a huge part of that. And so the way that we view ourselves will be filtered through the lens of how our financial situation was before, is now, and how we think it will be in the future. So if we are at a place of rebuilding and trying to develop growth, but there's hope, but we have a plan, but we're working with a team of people or a person that is helping us tell our money where to go, then you're going to be developing self-esteem and building yourself up from that pathway, right? Just the same as if you feel like you've lost hope in it, or your self-esteem is hit, if you lose a job, or if, you know, the stock market crashes, or right, like it's going to hit your self-esteem and your self-worth based on how much you value money.
Yeah. So, you know, when people are feeling this way, like what are some ways that they can overcome this feeling, you know, where it's very negative, whether it's towards self-esteem or just money beliefs in general? Like, how do they overcome it?
So again, we start with, what do we actually believe? You got to know where your thought process is with it so that we can then shift it. And then it's having the conversations. We are so afraid to bring finances out into the light and talk about it. It baffles me, the number of people who just don't want to talk about it. Because if I'm going through and I'm trying to figure out, where's your anxiety come from, where's the depression coming from, and then I'll ask you about your sleep, I'll ask you about your eating, I can ask you about your sexual habits, and people are great. I ask you about your finances and people shut down. It is hilarious to me that you will talk about your sex life, but you won't talk about your finances.
We find that when they come to a meeting with a financial advisor too.
And so being able to recognize where you are, what your thought processes are, bring it out into the light. Start saying, I'm really struggling with my finances and I don't know where the hope is. Because when we keep something in our head, it is way bigger than when we say it out loud. And actually, there are chemicals in the brain that are released that actually make you feel better about something the moment you speak it. Mm-hmm. Our brain is hardwired for us to talk about things. We are neurobiologically designed, set up to be a part of a tribe. And that means that we are supposed to be talking about things.
Yeah, people also like talking about things that, you know, that are going well, that they're good at, you know, whatever, whether it's, you know, sexual stuff or, you know, finances. But, you know, finances are not going well, they don't want to talk about it.
Right. And that's when we need to talk about it, right? When you're struggling, that's when you need your people to help. That's when, you know, I always say, you need to be smart enough to know what you don't know.
Yep.
Right. And I am smart enough to know I don't know enough about this. So I'm going to call someone to help me out. And I'm going to sit down with someone who can show me, this is what you need to do, and have that conversation, and then go teach the other people in my world about it. Right. And so one of the fastest ways to build self-esteem is to learn something new and teach somebody else. And so if someone is struggling with their finances, they'll acknowledge it, talk about it, learn something new, and then go tell their family and friends about it. Huge self-esteem boost.
I love that. I feel like everything you've said today is so relevant. And I think all of us agree if people just start talking a little bit more about their personal finances, it would change the entire outlook of how people feel about money. And like it is, the biggest part is just starting to talk about it and say what you're so afraid of. Because then it doesn't have as much power over you. And kind of going with that, how would you recommend just in people's day-to-day life, how they can manage their anxiety that they have around their money and talking about money and everything that goes along with that?
So anxiety is a liar. The number one lie that anxiety tells is you are the only one, right? You are the only one that is struggling. None of my friends and family are struggling this way. No one I know is struggling. Lie. It's a lie, because I have never been in a room full of people where every single person in that room has their shit together. Sorry, excuse my language. I've never been in a room full of people where everyone has it together, right? There are always people struggling. And so recognizing that it is a lie to think that I'm the only one who struggles with this. And then control the narrative. We are so mean to ourselves. The way that we talk about ourselves when we feel like something is wrong with us, we are so mean. And being able to say that I'm not a failure, I am, it's not irreversible, right? And have the conversation of, even if all you can say is, I know that there's a problem and I'm working to fix it. And then showing yourself, these are the things I'm doing today. And if I don't have anything that I need to do about it today, then I'm off the hook for today. I don't have to fight with myself on it. I don't have to worry about it because I have everything set up. I'm doing all of the things, and today requires no more effort from me. And the ability to just relax once you've told your brain that you recognize there's a problem, I am handling it, and I don't have to do anything right in this moment. It's huge.
That is great. And I've just appreciated so much all the information that you've provided us today. I think that this has been probably one of the favorite podcasts that I've been a part of. I think no matter what stage we are in our finances, whether we're financial advisors or young people, this is a podcast that everybody can listen to and take something from. Before we wrap this up, I have the final question for you. And this is not related to anything that you do professionally. I want to hear one random fact about yourself.
One random fact about myself. Oh, Lord. My daughter and I have our own language. So,
okay, you're gonna have to elaborate on that.
so we call it Georgish because that's my former last name, right? And my kid's last name. I know that it's common knowledge that twins will often develop their own language to speak to each other, right? My daughter and I have our own language. So we can have entire conversations in public. And I mean, so yeah, she started doing it. Tyler, my son, does it a little bit, but she started doing it when she was little. She's 17 now. We've never stopped. So
That's awesome. I love it. I love it.
That makes it interesting for Tyler and your husband when you guys are doing that too.
So Tyler can follow along. Like, he knows what we're talking about. He doesn't really like join in as much anymore. Poor Aaron. Like, he's just stuck, but that's fine.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Ashley. Really appreciate it. And we hope that you enjoyed today's podcast with Ashley and found it as interesting and informative as we did. If you're ready to begin working with a financial advisor, please reach out to us via social media. Also, be sure to subscribe to our Spotify to listen to future podcast episodes and check out our YouTube page for more of our video content.